Coming up on The World Today. Dutch government resigns over child welfare fraud scandal. Indonesia searches rubble for survivors after 6.4 magnitude earthquake. Plus, Uganda's Bobby Wine says he's under siege as military enters his house after he disputed early presidential results. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin the programme today in the Netherlands, where Prime Minister Mark Rutte's government has stepped down after thousands of families were wrongly accused of child welfare fraud and told to pay money back. Dutch MPs decided that families suffered an unparalleled wrong, with tax officials, politicians, judges and civil servants leaving them powerless. Many of those affected were from an immigrant background and hundreds were plunged into financial difficulty. Mr. Rutte submitted the cabinet's resignation to the king. A leading scientist advising the UK government says one of two coronavirus variants first detected in Brazil has been found in the country. But the version discovered is not the variant of concern. The variant of concern from Brazil, detected in travellers to Japan, is thought to be more infectious. It has led to travellers from South America and Portugal being banned from entering the UK. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
Brazil's army has transported oxygen supplies to Amazonas state after it made an urgent call for help amid shortages in hospitals treating coronavirus patients. Experts warn a new variant of coronavirus could be driving a rapid rise in infections there.
So we had a look at this particular...
Meanwhile, the UK Transport Minister says a Brazilian variant of the coronavirus is significant enough to justify stopping flights from South America as a precaution.
Yes, there's a travel ban from Brazil and actually, I think, 14 other South American countries and also Portugal, because there is this new variant. We've seen these variants before. There are thousands of them, of course, but some of them which are more easily transmitted are obviously of greater concern. And it's really as a precautionary principle. We're so close now. We've got 3 million of these vaccines in people's arms in the UK. We want to make sure we don't fall at this last hurdle. So it's really a precautionary principle. It's come in and people can't now travel from those locations.
The travel ban, which was announced on Thursday, does not prevent UK or Irish nationals from returning to the UK from those countries or workers transporting essential goods from Portugal. The Brazilian variant shares some characteristics with those found in Britain and South Africa, which are believed by scientists to be more transmissible but not to cause more severe disease. France is aiming to give the COVID-19 shot to up to 4 million nationals by the end of February after the government imposed tighter restrictions to limit the spread of the virus. The country's health minister says between 2.4 million and 4 million individuals should be vaccinated before March, as the nation expects the vaccine's delivery to speed up by the beginning of spring. While countries rush to inoculate their most at-risk members of society from coronavirus, Indonesia has put a surprising group at the front of the queue: social media influencers. Officials say it's in an effort to eradicate increasing skepticism around the vaccine. Indonesia is taking a markedly different approach to others. Instead of vaccinating elderly people in the first phase, after frontline workers, it will target younger working people aged 18 to 59. An investigation led by the World Health Organization into the origins of COVID-19 begins today, with virtual meetings between a team of international scientists and their Chinese hosts in the city of Wuhan. And finally, in emergency response to the recent cluster of coronavirus infections hitting China's Hebei province, Officials are ramping up efforts to construct 3,000 makeshift housing units to be used as quarantine venues for people in isolation for medical observation against COVID-19. Over the past 24 hours, China reported 144 new infections, its highest single-day infection tally since the 1st of March.
Our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka, joins us now for the UK's response to the new variants identified in Brazil. Juliana, the UK has come under fire, especially from Portugal, for banning travellers from South American countries over this new Brazilian variant. But how are people at home reacting to this travel ban?
Well, I think the biggest fire that the UK government are under within its own aisles, I think that's really the main concern. I think people are particularly angry and ticked off that once again, even though we are the worst affected European country with COVID-19, that we're still slow to react. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, was giving a statement in front of the Health Select Committee earlier in the week, which is where we first discovered that there was this Brazilian variant. As the secretary there, Grant Shapps, was saying, there are thousands of different variants, but I think there's a major concern about this particular Brazilian variant because there have been pictures that we've seen on social media showing that in the region that it's in, it's spreading much more quickly. And now virologists here in the UK have said there are two Brazilian variants, but the one that they have already picked up in the UK doesn't appear to be the one that's a cause for concern. There is another one that they're hoping hasn't arrived here in the UK. And what they're expecting is that if you have been infected with COVID-19 before, perhaps you could be infected with this new type. Lots of questions that the government will have to answer as to why, once again, it's taking them so long to place this travel ban, even with the PCR tests, which, again, Nigeria has been doing for months and months and months. That was just stated in the UK earlier this week. So I think, you know, there are cause for concern. We have had the number of infections. Just before I got into the studio, they announced them yesterday. A further 55,761 people tested positive for COVID-19. The day before, it was 48,000. So the lockdown measures don't seem to be working. Another 1,280 people are dying. So clearly it really is completely out of control here in the UK, which is, of course, why we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister anytime soon.
Yeah, like you mentioned, you know, it doesn't seem like the lockdown in place seems to be working. But how is the health system faring amid all this?
Well, the headlines here in the UK, Temi, is that the healthcare system is on the brink of collapse here in the UK. Several hospitals across the country have declared states of emergency. We've seen pictures and scenes of ambulances literally back to back. There is no space in the wards. We've seen children's wards that have now completely been taken over by COVID-19 patients. This January, this third or second wave, if you like, of COVID-19 is much worse than the first wave. This week in particular, the government have really been trying to tell people to just stay at home and take these measures seriously. They're putting much more pressure on the police, on essential retailers that are still open to try and curb people's behaviour. But the NHS is really struggling. Lots of staff are off sick because, of course, you know, they're right on the front line. So many of them are getting infected. This is a really dark, grim illness, and a lot of staff within the NHS as well are facing mental health issues. Many of them just cannot bear going into work because, you know, they're surrounded by death every single day. But aside from COVID-19, I think a topic of main concern here in this country is about other treatments. Now, there was a stat that was released earlier today showing that 200,000 people have been waiting for more than a year for their treatment, which means they were supposed to have treatment within the past 12 months, but because of COVID-19, they just couldn't. This time last year, there were only 1,163 people waiting. So it just goes to show how much COVID-19 is taking over the entire healthcare system here in the UK. Hundreds of cancer operations, have also been cancelled. So, you know, not only are people dying of COVID-19 in this country, people are dying because they were supposed to see their doctor, but sadly they haven't been able to.
Yeah. Juliana, it seems the situation really is critical at this moment. You know, Boris Johnson is planning to hold a news conference just a few minutes from now. Do we expect him to, you know, the country is already on lockdown. Do we expect him to tighten restrictions with what the country is facing? The health system is literally on the brink of collapse.
We are expecting a tightening of restrictions. We saw that earlier in the week with the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon. You can barely get any tighter than a lockdown. But, you know, there have been concerns that some non-essential retailers are still open, you know, like the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, was saying, why are, you know, off-licence selling wine and alcohol considered an essential service? Nurseries are still open. A lot of nursery workers are not happy. They want to be put in the same status as schools and education. But as you said, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is going to speak in about 20 minutes. He'll be joined by Professor Chris Whitty and the Chief Scientific Officer, Sir Patrick Vallance. What Boris Johnson is expected to say is to give an update on the vaccine, because the vaccination is the only way we can get out of this, believe it or not, because I know there are a lot of anti-vaxxers, but who does and who doesn't get the jab is going to be a topic of much discussion over the next couple of months. The latest statistics do show that 3,234,946 people have been inoculated. That is on target. That is progress. Perhaps Boris Johnson would also talk about the fact that there'll now be 24-hour centres, so people can go at any time. Until we have the most critical people in society vaccinated, we can't get out of this lockdown. The government have put a date of mid-February. Some are saying that's completely unrealistic. It could be more March, end of March, who knows? But yes, we are going to get an announcement from the Prime Minister. And any time Boris Johnson stands at that podium, there's generally some more news. But I don't think there'll be tightening of restrictions yet, but that's still on the cards, Tenny.
Juliana, one has to think about the economy amid all this, but, you know, a lot to keep our eyes on. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme, and do stay safe.
Thank you.
Now, US President-elect Joe Biden has unveiled a $1.9 trillion stimulus plan for the coronavirus-sapped economy before he takes office next week. If passed by Congress, it would include $1 trillion for households, with direct payments of $1,400 to all Americans. The relief proposal includes $415 billion to fight the virus and $440 billion for small businesses. Mr. Biden, a Democrat, has promised to beat the pandemic that has killed more than 385,000 people in the United States.
Our rescue plan also includes immediate relief to Americans hardest hit and most in need. We will finish the job of getting a total of $2,000 in cash relief to people who need it the most. The $600 already appropriated is simply not enough. You just have to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table. We'll also provide more peace of mind for struggling families by extending unemployment insurance beyond the end of March for millions of workers waiting for hours.
Still ahead on the programme. Zurich transformed into winter wonderland as heavy snowfall cloaks the city's trees, buildings and bridges in white. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the program. According to a new court filing, U.S. prosecutors now believe supporters of President Donald Trump plan to capture and assassinate elected officials in their siege of the Capitol building last week. Meanwhile, more than 20,000 armed National Guard troops have been mobilized in Washington, D.C. after officials warned of the threat of more violence at the presidential inauguration of Joe Biden on January the 20th, as well as in state capitals. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Bird has more.
Street closures and additional armed forces are just a few of the security measures being put in place in Washington to secure the Capitol for Inauguration Day, while the FBI continues its investigation.
In the weeks leading up to the January 6th rally, the FBI worked internally with every FBI field office to ensure that we were looking for any intelligence that may have developed about potential violence during the rally on January 6th. We developed some intelligence that a number of individuals were planning to travel to the D.C. area with intentions to cause violence. We immediately shared that information and action was taken, as demonstrated by the arrest of Enrique Tarrio by the Metropolitan Police Department the night before the rally. Other individuals were identified in other parts of the country and the travel subsequently disrupted. Since these events, the FBI has worked hand in hand with the United States Attorney's Office and our law enforcement partners here in D.C. and across the country to arrest and charge multiple individuals who took part in the destruction. In 6 days, we have opened over 160 case files, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Scholar with Protect Democracy gives insight into future plans for violence against the U.S. democracy.
Finally, likelihood of future violence is significant, unfortunately. This has been part of a trend. It's been a trend line that's been increasing since the violent threats against health officials much earlier in the summer, violent threats against elected officials, voting machine technicians, and so on, increasingly violent rallies. More in Common has been using ads to redirect people away from violence, a common technique in the CVE community. They surged capacity last week because of so many online comments that were causing them to believe violence were imminent. We now know that there are scheduled events on January 9th, the Second Amendment rally in D.C., on the 17th, the Boogaloo Boys in D.C. and other capitals, and on Inauguration Day, a Million Militia March is scheduled.
This Inauguration Day will be like no other, not only due to COVID-19 pandemic, but also due to recent violent acts against the U.S. Capitol. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
Away from the United States, rescuers are searching through the rubble of a partially collapsed Indonesian hospital after an earthquake struck the island of Sulawesi, killing at least 34 people. The 6.2 magnitude quake this morning came just hours after an earlier smaller tremor. Officials fear the death toll will increase as rescue efforts continue. Rescuers have been hampered by power cuts and lack of a phone signal.
Indonesian search and rescue workers raced to find survivors after a 6.2 magnitude earthquake killed at least 35 people and injured hundreds on Sulawesi Island. The quake and aftershocks damaged more than 300 homes and 2 hotels, as well as flattening a hospital and the office of a regional governor, where authorities say several people have been trapped under the rubble. No tsunami warning was issued, but the head of Indonesia's Meteorology and Geophysics Agency warns that aftershocks could follow, with the possibility that another powerful quake could trigger a tsunami.
Kami menganalisis masih dimungkinkan.
President Joko Widodo has offered condolences to the victims and urges people to stay calm and authorities to step up search efforts. At least 15,000 people have been displaced following the quake. Aid workers say the pandemic is likely to complicate the distribution of aid in the relatively remote area.
Bagian belakang.
Hours earlier, a 5.9 magnitude earthquake struck in the same district, damaging several houses. Straddling the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire, Indonesia, an archipelago of high tectonic activity, is regularly hit by earthquakes.
Uganda opposition presidential candidate Bobi Wine says the military has taken control of his house. Bobi Wine tweeted the news just hours after he alleged Thursday's election was rigged, saying every legal option is on the table to challenge the official results. He also referred to himself as the president-elect. The Electoral Commission said earlier on Friday that President Yoweri Museveni, who is seeking a sixth term, led in the vote with results in from 29% of polling stations. He has received 63% of ballots, while Bobi Wine had 28%. Final results are expected by Saturday afternoon, but Bobi Wine maintains that the tally is a result of the worst rigging in Ugandan history.
Secret ballot in most polling stations. The military gave people pre-ticked ballots. They gave them pre-ticked ballot papers. In other cases, some people were ordered to vote from the desk in the presence of everyone. I am very confident that we defeated the dictator by far. I call upon all Ugandans to reject the blackmail. We have certainly won this election, and we've won it by far. General Museveni and his small clique of oppressors are trying yet again to impose themselves on the people of Uganda.
North Korea has unveiled a new type of submarine-launched ballistic missile described by state media as the world's most powerful weapon. Several of the missiles were displayed at a parade overseen by leader Kim Jong-un. The weapon's actual capabilities remain unclear as it is not known to have been tested. Images released by North Korean state media shows at least 4 large black and white missiles being driven past flag-waving crowds. And finally, Zurich has transformed into a wintry postcard come to life as heavy snowfall cloaked the Swiss city's trees, buildings and bridges in white. Around 35 centimeters of snow is expected to fall on Zurich today alone, while elsewhere in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, snowfall is forecast to reach up to 50 centimeters. However, it's not all fun and games. The frosty episode has caused delays in public transport and hassles for drivers who found their vehicles buried in snow. Police have also set up perimeters around trees to protect pedestrians from falling branches because of the heavy snow buildup. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyola Shubowale. Have a lovely weekend and stay safe.